Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Rich, and you've turned into another episode of Wristwatch Rescue, where yours truly rescues vintage watches from the past. Today I've got this beautiful 140-year-old Elgin pocket watch. This watch comes to me from a woman by the name of Margie May. Now, the interesting thing is that the engraving on this pocket watch actually says Ruby May on the back. So this pocket watch has been passed down through her family for 140 years. Now, the story is two sisters, Ruby May and her older sister, Ella, both got one of these watches for Christmas in 1888. It was given to the two sisters for Christmas, and he had them engraved. Now, this one says Ruby May from Papa, Xmas 1888. And it's amazing that this watch is still in the family, because in 1925, the house that Ruby May was living in burned to the ground. But the watch survived, and it went on to be handed down to the next generation. And then Margie and her sister received the two watches in the 1970s. And Margie got Ruby May's, and her sister got the other one. But unfortunately, her sister's house sometime in the 1990s was robbed, and that one has been lost. So this is the only survivor of the two watches received for Christmas presents. So what I need to do is get the watch serviced. So that entails taking it completely apart, looking for broken parts, getting them fixed, and then cleaning it, and then lubricating it and getting it back to Margie. Now, Elgin itself is quite a story too. Elgin was the biggest watchmaker in America for almost 100 years. They kind of did the Henry Ford thing. They mass-produced watches, and a group of investors in the 1860s came to a little town in Elgin, Illinois, and they stole a bunch of watchmakers from the Waltham plant in Massachusetts and paid them very, very well. And they came out to Illinois and started building watches. And they were one of the first companies to actually mass produce parts that were interchangeable from watch to watch. Before that, most watches were handmade by a watchmaker, and no two watches had the exact same parts. So theirs was a big step forward in the manufacturing of watches. Elgin was known as the working man's watch in the day. They made so many watches, but they weren't super expensive, but they weren't low end either. They were right in the middle. Over the 100 years that Elgin made watches, they made over 60 million watches, which is incredible. When I took this beautiful dial off and I flipped it over, I was amazed. There's a magic marker X on the back of this dial. Now, this thing is 140 years old. I didn't know they had magic markers back then, but evidently they do, because I know by a fact that this is all original, so it hasn't been replaced. But I'm going to keep that dial in its little dial box and keep it safe along with the hands. The other thing, I don't know if you noticed, the hands on this watch were blued. Now, I've seen blued hands in a lot of watches over the years, but they were the most beautiful color blue I've ever seen. One of the first things I like to do when I take a watch apart is to remove the balance bridge and the balance wheel. They're connected together, of course, but that will protect it, because the staff in that wheel is very, very delicate. And I'm frankly amazed that it's not broken after all these years, but it's intact. So we won't have to replace the balance staff, which you have to do on a lot of older pocket watches, because they didn't have shock resistance in the day when this was built. And the other odd thing I noticed, there's jewels on this upper bridge, but no jewels on the main plate, which I find odd, but I guess that's how they were made back then. Now, I'm using my little pin vise back there to slow the release of the mainspring power. because you don't want it all coming out at one time. That could be detrimental to these older parts. Now I'm taking the upper bridge off because I want to get in and get the train of wheels out of there. Well, they look pretty nice. All the pivots on those wheels look really, really nice. But I do see a problem, I do see a jewel that is cracked in that bridge, so we're going to have to get to that a little bit later on after we wash it. But every wheel as I take out looks in incredible shape. So this watch was very well taken care of. So it should come back and work really well when we're done with this service. Now this is the first pocket watch I've done on the channel, and it's kind of enjoyable because everything is in a larger scale. I've been working on wristwatches for so many years that I'm used to tiny little parts, but everything is extremely large on this. Now I've got to flip this thing over because that center wheel is still attached to the cannon pinion. Of course, I got my little cannon pinion removal tool that easily pulls that off. Of course, it gets stuck. And I see that the center wheel is stuck in there too. So yeah, we do need some cleaning on this watch. So we'll get this center wheel out. It looks in good shape, but there's a lot of caked on dirt on that center pinion. Now I've got most of it apart. The last thing to take apart is the keyless works. I don't think you could technically call this the keyless works because it's not like a modern wristwatch. But this is kind of a strange, I've never seen anything like this before. The setting lever is that lever up there at the top of the picture that I'm taking off right now. And it pulls out and pushes that entire thing that looks like a figure 8 over. It's kind of odd. And then the crown wheel is underneath. And then that wheel that's attached to that figure 8 is some kind of intermediate wheel that takes the power when you wind it over to the mainspring barrel. A unique idea, I think. Now, this is the little intermediate wheel that takes the motion, in other words, connects the motion works. So when that wheel goes, that figure 8 goes forward, it engages with that wheel there and the wheel that's on the top of this funny looking little arm. And not something I'm used to seeing. But anyway, let's see how the mainspring looks when we get in here. I can get my big fingers out of the way. Yeah, for 137, 140 years, it doesn't look too bad. I think we may just reuse that. Looks nice. Very dry. Not a whole lot of oil on it because in this age of a watch, they most likely used oils and greases that were animal-based. Now, here's all of the parts laid out, and I'm getting ready to put them in the cleaning machine here. So what I'm going to do is take these smaller baskets, put them into a little bit larger basket, take it out to the garage where my cleaning machine is located, attach it, and put it through a 3-step process. Now, the names you see scrolling up here are my Patreons. Now, I have started a Patreon page. Well, what is Patreon, you ask? Well, it's a place for you to go out and support your favorite creators, be it on YouTube or on their own website or wherever. But mine starts at $4 and goes up from there. I have 3 levels, and I'd appreciate it if you would support me. And I'll put a link down below so you can go to the site and check it out. Now, there's what I'm talking about. There's that broken jewel. So these jewels are actually rubbed in. So we're going to have to get them out of there. Now, I've got a donor watch. So I've taken a jewel from the donor watch. But first things first, what I'm going to do is use my little jewel press here. And what it is there's a little plunger on top there. And it goes down in, line it up, and screws it down real slowly, and just slowly pushes the jewel out. And the jewel falls out through the bottom. Now, this is that little part that needs to be rubbed in. But before I can rub it in, I've got to open it up just a little bit. So I've got a Bourgeon tool here. It's a reaming tool. And I'm just going to gently ream the inside of this jewel hole. Just push that, because this is soft brass, so it's easily pushed out. Now, once I've done that, I've got my jewel that I got out of my donor watch, and I'm going to put it, this one is actually a kind of a, what they call a donut. See how it looks like a donut? So I'm going to drop that in there with my jewel pick. Get it level. Then I'm going to get my staking set out. And this is a C and E, I believe it is. Now, the lower stump, and then I'm going to get the upper stump. Now, they slide down through there. Now, this is the lower stump. It's just going to support the weight. Now, this upper one is convex, is a cone shape, and it will push that soft brass around that jewel. So I've got the perfect size for this. And now, I'm not going to hit this with a hammer like you do with a lot of other staking processes. This guy, I'm just pushing with a lot of force with my hand. You can't see it here. And then I'm going to turn it and just what's called rubbing it in. And that's what I'm doing here. And it's just going to push a little bit of that brass back into the shape. And then when I take it out, you see it here. It's nice and round and it's pushed back in. And that'll hold that jewel. And of course, that jewel needs to be cleaned because I got it out of an older watch. And the other side looks beautiful too. Now, the first thing I want to do is put the click back in. Now, it goes over this little peg here, and there's a giant click spring that wraps all the way around the inside of that barrel hole. Now, what a click does is it actually stops the main barrel from unwinding all at one time. So it's like a ratchet. See that little point on the end of that arm? It'll stop the ratchet wheel that'll fit in here shortly. Now, this funny looking little thing, I had to put some Rodico on. I still don't know what it's called, but I'm going to screw it down, and it's part of that motion works. In other words, when the figure eight thing is pushed one direction, it engages with that intermediate wheel there, and then turns the other intermediate wheel that we'll see here in a shortly. Now, let's see. Yeah, there we go. We'll get that in there. See how that turns? And then I'm going to put a little bit of lubricant on top. Now, this is 8200 Mobius. And then this is that figure eight, crazy looking figure eight thing. Now, it's going to engage with that large setting lever that's up at the top of the screen there. Now I'm holding that, I guess you would call that the yoke spring back so that I can get this reverse screw put back in. And then once I have it in there, I can let go of that spring. I didn't take that. So what I need to do is tighten that screw down, and then you'll see how this works. Okay, when I pull out that setting lever, you see that whole figure eight? The back of it moves. Well, in one direction, it moves to engage with the mainspring barrel to wind it, which is that wheel you see there. Now, I'm putting a little lubricant on that post, and we'll put a little bit more where this other intermediate wheel goes in. They're here again. This is 8200 Mobius. And we'll just screw this guy down. And then this is part where what you would call the motion works. Now, here is the actual ratchet wheel. Okay, it sits on the bottom here. I'm going to put some oil here again, a little bit more 8200. give it a little bit less friction when you wind it. Now this guy has to engage with that click at the top and then also the crown wheel there on the left. And then I can just set the mainspring barrel down on top. Now we can start putting the train of wheels back together. So first thing in is I'm going to put in the escape wheel. And the escape wheel is always the one with the funny looking little teeth. The next wheel we're going to put in is called the seconds wheel. Now, not to be confused with the second wheel, but this is actually the wheel that you see that pinion going through the bottom. The seconds hand on the dial attaches to that. And then this would be your third wheel. Just kind of get it in its hole there. And it'll take the power down to the seconds wheel once I put in the center wheel there. So here's the center wheel. Now I'm going to put, you can see it's nice and clean now. I'm going to put a little 9010 Mobius oil on there. That's the lightest oil I use. Got a little bit too much. Going to take some off with that Rodico. And then just kind of drop it down in there. Now this is going to take the power directly from the mainspring barrel and move it on down the line. So here's that reconstructed jewels on my bridge. I'm going to drop them down here. And let's see if we can get them all in there easily enough. That's always kind of a little waltz. Oh, one thing I forgot. I forgot the, I guess you'd call that the stem. Yep, almost forgot it. And one thing you want to do is put some of this blue grease. This is going to keep the stem lasting for years because it's metal on metal when you wind it or set the wheels. Set the dials, I mean. So now we got that back in there. We can get back to the bridge on top. We just got to line up all those pivots. There's 5 of them in that bridge to line up. So it's a little bit of a waltz for a while until everything drops into its hole. But once it does, you'll know it because you can see that it'll just drop down there really quick, which it just did. And then I can just tighten up these screws. Now, I'm not tightening them all the way because I want to make sure things are going to move and not put pressure on a pivot that's not quite in its hole. But as you can see it spinning like crazy back there. That's your escapement wheel is going so fast. So we got them in the right ones. So now we can come back and tighten them up all the way. Just a little safety precaution I like to do. And it's nice to see these blued screws. They did things so different 140 years ago with watches. Now I'm going to put a little 9010 Mobius oil in these 3 jewels on the top. And of course there's no jewels on the bottom, so I still don't understand that. And then I'm going to put some on these metal pivots also. Then I'm going to turn it over and do the same thing on the back. But when I do, you're going to notice there's only brass on steel there. So amazingly, those holes are not reamed out very well. They haven't lost their shape. Now, the next thing I want to do is clean the balance wheel and the pallet fork. So I do them by hand. I don't like to put a balance wheel back on a plate and put it through that cleaning machine I have. It's just a different way of doing it. A lot of guys put it on the plate and clean it that way. But I see sometimes some fuzzy looking things in the hairspring when I do that. So this is why I do it here. And then what I'm going to do is take it out. Now this is just a solvent that it's sitting in. It's called 1-dip. Then blow the excess off. And then take that little pallet fork out and do the same thing to it. It's kind of a neat little pallet fork with those decorative arms sticking out. I don't know if that was for decoration. Maybe it's for balance. I'm not sure. Never read anything about that. Now this guy is going to go in, and those little jewels that are in there are going to engage with the escapement wheel as it goes back and forth. So once we get it in its hole, then we can drop the bridge on top of it. Now this is one jewel we don't oil because if you stop to think about it, the pallet fork only moves slightly one way and the other. It doesn't spin around like the wheels do. So what you're going to find is if you put oil on those pivots, it's going to slow it down, and that's one thing you don't want to do. Now I'm going to use my pinion vise again and wind up the watch and kind of check the bounce here. As you can see how it jumps, that's what you want to see. So that tells me the power is coming down. Now I'm using my oiling tool here to get oil in the bottom of the jewel for the balance wheel. Now to get the top jewel, I set it on my little post here, and I'm just lifting the spring up and dropping the oil directly in with my tool. No need to take the whole thing apart. And then once it's in there, I can just take it and flip it over. And we'll see this moment of truth. Now this part of watchmaking never gets old for me, because this is when the moment of truth and you see if your work that you've done pays off. So let's just gently get the pivots and the jewel holes. There we go. See if we get that guy. Come on. Almost. There we go. Oh, I love it. Nothing better than that. Can watch that for hours. Yeah, I'm a watch nerd, I could tell you that. So, get the screw in there, and it'll start leveling out. It's a little wobbly there right now, but once I get the screw in, it'll level up. Now, back on the other side. So, we're going to get the cannon pinion on and the minute wheel in. So, here's your cannon pinion. Now, it's friction fitted. Now, you just kind of push it down until it clicks, and the gears engage with that little intermediate wheel there. Then you can drop your minute wheel in and get them all engaged. And then here's your hour wheel. So we're moving right along here. Now I want to make sure the motion works. I've got that setting lever pulled out, so you can see when I turn the stem, the motion works is working. So I know I can set the hands, and that's what I was checking there. Now we'll get this dial back on. Goes on really nice. There's 3 screws on this one. And then we're going to put it back in the case. Gently, just kind of slide it in. Now I'm going to shut the lid so I can turn it over and put the case screws in on the back. There's 2 large case screws here, and then you just tighten them down, and that'll actually engage with the outer rim of the case. Now, one of the unique things about pocket watches, back in the 1880s and in the early 20th century, you could pick the case. You'd pick the movement, go to the watch store, pick what movement you want, and then you could pick a nice case that's engraved like this one, which is 14 karat gold, or you could pick a less expensive, easier one. Now what I'm doing here is the hands were actually sticking together, so they were magnetized. So I put it on the little demagnetizer to get them working better. Now there's your hour hand I've just put on. Checking to make sure it's not dragging anywhere. And then I'm going to line up the minute hand using my little wooden tweezers to keep from scratching this beautiful ceramic dial. These old pocket watches, the dials were all ceramic. Then I'm just going to push it down. There we go. Here again, check it to make sure it's clearing. Sure enough. And then here's your seconds hand. Just kind of tap it on, and it's running good. Looks nice. Now, what I'm doing is I'm using a UV glue because I'm going to put a new crystal in this bezel. Now, I snapped the bezel on before I started doing this. Just call me crazy, but I didn't want to glue the bezel in and then snap it on and have it crack. So I'm doing it kind of backwards. But what I'm doing is putting this UV glue all the way around that groove where the crystal is going to sit. Now, the neat thing about this UV glue, I can work for hours with this stuff and it won't set up. Now, here's the new crystal. I got this from a place called White's out in, I think it's San Francisco, but it's an American-made crystal. And it's real glass. Now, when I take it out, you can see how paper thin this thing is. And typically when you do this, I wasn't, you measure the opening, and then you order one size bigger, one size smaller, just in case this one doesn't fit. And I'm just going to push it into place. Now I'm going to take this little UV lamp and put it in there, and I'm going to let it sit under the lamp for a good long time, about 4 or 5 hours. And once it sets up hard, it's clear as glass and it won't come out. So here we go. This is one beautiful watch. Now that you've got new crystal in it and it's running good, and you can see all of the engraving on the back. They really did it right back then. And I can't wait to get this back in Margie's hand and let it be passed down to the next generation, because she's got several children and that she can pass this on to. So the saga continues, and the story will too. But let's take one last peek at it working inside. It's gorgeous. You see how shiny it is after it came through the washing machine? But Margie, this was a treat to work on this historical piece for you, and I hope you enjoy it. And I'll see you all on the next one.